Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm here to talk to you about some Portuguese classics I think you should read. So as you all probably know, I'm Portuguese. I'm from Lisbon. I've lived in Brazil. I've read a lot of Portuguese classics in the Portuguese language and Portuguese from Portugal mainly. Today I'm gonna talk to you about Portuguese books, so from Portugal, that if you want to get into reading Portuguese or if you want to understand maybe our literary history and context, maybe you should give them a go. They are fundamental classics in Portugal, and they are also books that I really enjoy, of course, especially in this video, which is Portuguese classics that I think you should check out. I'm gonna start with a more contemporary one because I think it's easier maybe for people to get into, and also because I think you can find them in English. So a lot of these books I think you can find them in English, and I will try to find them and leave the link down below of the Goodreads page and of the book depository link maybe, since it's really hard to find them sometimes, and in Portuguese as well. So if they are not available on book depository, I'm gonna try to link you to a Portuguese publisher that publishes them. First one that I have here is our only Nobel Prize winner. He's a writer from the 20th century. This is a mandatory book that is to read in school, in the last year of school, but it's also from a author I think everyone should read. He has a very particular style of writing. The book is Memorial do Convento by José Saramago. I think in English it's called Baltasar and Blimunda. This is a story of several characters that are somehow related to the construction of Convento Mafra, which is a monument and a palace and a convent that was constructed by the King Dom João V in honor of the birth of his first son, who would be King Dom José I, in the first half of the 18th century. And it's about the hard work that all the workers had to go through to build this monument. It's the story of ordinary people, and it's understandable that Saramago would write about them, since he's a very left-wing writer. He is not shy about that in his life, and so he values a lot of the people and the very common, very poor people that are behind these main figures, the kings. He does joke about them a bit, so his view of kings is very sarcastical. But Saramago is a Nobel Prize winner, so obviously you should check it out, and it's really good. If however you're scared of that one, so I would recommend one that's been adapted to screen, Blindness. That was made into a movie with Mark Ruffalo and Julianne Moore, I think, and it was shot in São Paulo as well, which is close to my heart. Blindness, I have this edition, or in Portuguese, Ensaio Sobre, Cegueira. It's a lot of friends of mine have read it. I haven't read it yet, but they say it's one of their favorite books. It's really well written, and the topics are really interesting as well. This is about the blindness that all of a sudden attacks all of society, and it's a white blindness, except for a few people who now have to help everyone else, and it's really interesting and thought-provoking. The second author and book that I'm going to recommend to you is by Fernando Pessoa, probably the most prominent Portuguese poet from the 20th century. So this one is like his own take on his kind of adaptation to the 20th century, and with his own ideas of another book that I'm going to talk to you about next. And this book by Fernando Pessoa is Mensagem. This is an edition for kids, not kids, but for students, but this is one I have. And Mensagem has sonnets and poems, and it's about historical figures. It's very interesting. It's written in a very interesting way, so each part represents a part of Portugal, a part of our culture, and people that were important to our foundation. And they have a title and a subtitle, and then inside, and all of this is very well thought through, so I would recommend to you that you search and you read about this book, not just by reading it, but understanding how it's built and how it's constructed. This is poetry, and it's 20th century, but It's beautiful poetry, of course, because it's Fernando Pessoa. There's a lot of other beautiful poems by him. I would recommend a Tabacaria, for example. If you're into a more prose, then a lot of people like to recommend the book of Disquiet. It's widely translated in a lot of languages. I know there are translations in English, so this one is one that I can recommend to you. I know that you can buy on like Book Depository. Like a year ago, everyone was buying it on BookTube. So I mean, if you want to buy a book of Disquiet, it's yeah, go read it. It's another persona that Fernando Pessoa constructed, and Fernando Pessoa is really complicated and interesting to understand. He doesn't write as himself. A lot of his poems are written through what we call heteronyms, or kind of like personas he creates. This one, though, it's by himself. So he signs this book, this work, as by himself, by Fernando Pessoa, because this has a lot of his views on the Portuguese history and culture and our fate and our destiny as a nation. So yeah, next one is my favorite. So this is an epic poem written in the style of Homer. For me, this is the greatest poet in the Portuguese language. I've argued about this with some of my teachers, and it's Camões, Luís de Camões. And the work that I would suggest to you then, it's about the same topics as Mensagem, but in a very, very different way, and it's Os Lusíadas. And this is an epic poem, so it's a gigantic poem about Portuguese nation and its foundation and its history and the discoveries. The period in which this author lived is from the 16th century. Everyone has to read parts of this in school in Portugal. It's very beautiful and it's amazing. But if you enjoy more loose poetry, so some sonnets or some other poems in its very different forms, he has other works published that are combined in his Lírica. And this is the one I own. It's a beautiful edition that I've read since I was like 7, and it's a beautiful, beautiful edition. But yeah, a lot of beautiful sonnets and poems are here. I would recommend that you check them out. And yeah, Camões is beautiful. But if you want like one book to read, then by him you have only kind of Os Lusíadas, which I will find a translated edition and put it in the description as well. So next we go to the 19th century, and one of my favorite authors, and that is Essa de Queiroz. He is hated by a lot of Portuguese kids learning in school, but I love him. I was introduced to him with a book that is easy to read, and I would recommend everyone reading it if they are starting to read Essa de Queiroz. And I received this in 2007, maybe even before that, and it's a Relíquia, or the Relic, by Essa de Queiroz. And it's a very funny book. It's a very satirical, ironic, critical work by Essa de Queiroz. And that's Luís is a very ironic, critical author. Is a realist, and it's so funny. It's about this journey of a guy who is sent by his aunt, and they pay his trip to go to the Holy Land, so to Jerusalem, to buy a relic. And so he brings a relic, supposedly. And it's so funny the whole way through. And the end, it's marvelous. And this is a very short book. I will always recommend people start reading Essa de Queiroz with this. But if you want to go through the classics, so his most famous classic that we have to read in schools, it's Os Maias. And the Maias, it's a family. I know it's related, so I will find it and link it down below as well. I won't spoil you, because if you're not Portuguese, you don't know what we know, that we all know because it's in our culture already. But everyone in Portugal knows the plot twist. But it's about Carlos da Maia, who was raised by his grandfather after his dad killed himself, because his mother left his father and went to live in Italy, leaving his son, Carlos, home. And his father killed himself because he couldn't live with the fact that his wife had left him and he loved her very much. But it's not about him, it's about Carlos, and Carlos is a physician and he's a dandy basically. And it's filled with beautiful writing, beautiful descriptions of Lisbon and Sintra. This is a beautiful work, it's beautifully done. People call it boring because it has a lot of descriptions, but it's lovely and beautiful, and I would definitely recommend you check out anything by Queiroz, but in a lot, these two are my favorites. Then we have one that's not very loved either by younger people, but it's mandatory to understand our literature, and he is Almeida Garrett, and we are in the beginning of the 19th century now, and his most famous work is Viagens, minha Terra. This is influenced by Stendhal and all of those authors. He lives in the Romantic era, but he's kind of he's a romantic, but he's very critical and ironic as well. And this is a very interesting book. This is a very famous work, and it's also very important in Portuguese literature. Another work that I would recommend if you want to read something very short, and it's a play, but it's very important to our literature as well, and everyone reads this in school. It's Frei Sousa, very short, very easy to read and understand, and also about this myth of the king that will one day come and save us from the Spanish rule. I'll definitely recommend you check out anything by Almeida Garrett. And lastly, I want to go back to forward to the 20th century and recommend something that a lot of people don't talk about, but that I've studied in university and I've grown to love, and it's Mário de Sá Carneiro. He's one of the writers of the Orfeu generation. If you're familiar with that, you should check out who they are. And Mário de Sá Carneiro was a writer, poet, and he was studying in Paris to be he was studying law in Paris, and his father didn't want him to dedicate himself only to writing, so he killed himself, which is very dramatic at 20-something years old. This is published in 1914, and it's a very insane book. It's beautifully written, and it's very interesting as well. And that is A Confissão de Lúcio by Mário de Sá Carneiro. This is one of his only, if not the only, prose he writes. He writes beautiful poetry as well, and you should check that out as well. Confissão de Lúcio is a very weird to explain book, but it's a man that is in prison, and he's now gonna tell you, he's gonna confess to you, so that's the title. He's gonna confess his crime, but he outright says that this is kind of unbelievable, but this is what he remembers. So it's a really interesting, really well written story. And Mário de Sá Carneiro is not very well loved, like he doesn't get as much credit as it should, because it's awesome. So check Mário de Sá Carneiro out if you are very interested in this period of Portuguese literature. If you enjoy Fernando Pessoa, for example, you should definitely check Mário de Sá Carneiro, who was one of the closest and most intimate friends of Fernando Pessoa. So yeah, those are all the books I would recommend to you, all the Portuguese classics that you may want to check out if you're interested. Don't forget to subscribe or give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will be back with another video. And I hope to see you soon. Goodbye!